Blessed are those who consider the poor. The Lord delivers them in the day of trouble.
The Lord protects them and keeps them alive. They are all blessed in the land.
You do not give them up to the will of their enemies.
The Lord sustains them on the sick bed. In their illness you heal all their infirmities.
As for me, I said, O Lord, be gracious to me, heal me, for I have sinned against you.
My enemies say of me in the house, when will he die, and his name perish?
Those who come to see me utter empty words, while their hearts gather mischief. When they go out, they tell it abroad.
All who make me whisper together about me. They imagine the worst for me.
They say, a deadly thing has fastened upon him. He will not rise again from where he lies.
Even my bosom friend, whom I trusted, who ate of my bread, has lifted a heel against me.
But you, O Lord, be gracious to me, and raise me up, that I may repay them.
By this I know that you are pleased with me, in that my enemy has not triumphed over me.
But you have upheld me because of my integrity, and set me in your presence forever.
Blessed be the Lord, God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Amen and amen.
Please be seated. Today's reading is from Proverbs, chapter 13, verse 11. Wealth hastily gotten will dwindle, but those who gather little by little will increase it. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Well, my sermon this morning will be a little different than the ones I normally preach. As I looked over the material that I gathered for this, the third sermon in the series on John Wesley's wisdom and money, and his second rule, which is save all that you can, the material kind of suggested a different approach. So for the next few moments, I'd like to share with you 3 stories, and then I'd like to frame each of those stories with some important scriptural texts that help us to see God in the midst of our living, in the midst of our decisions. John Wesley's second rule for the use of money was to save all that you can. Now, the very idea of saving money kind of goes against the grain of our modern culture. One has described the time we live in now as the culture of now, that the only thing that matters is this very moment. And hopefully our faith and our confidence in Christ can help us transcend this moment and to live with an eye toward eternity. The first story is a very troubling one. Homer and Langley Collier were teenagers in 1909 when their family moved to a 3-story brownstone on Fifth Avenue in Harlem. And after they received their university education, their parents moved out of the house and they moved in. They never left. That was where they died in 1947. They were discovered when an anonymous call to the police reported a strange smell of dead bodies coming from the home. The police arrived. They were unable to get through the front door because of the mountains of junk piled behind it. They climbed through a second-story window and found Homer, who was blind and deaf, slumped over his chair. He'd been dead for several days, and Langley was nowhere to be found. 3 weeks later, they discovered him, crushed under hundreds of boxes, the victim of one of the booby traps he had set to protect all of his possessions from intruders he had imagined were trying to break in and steal their stuff. The entire house was packed, from wall to wall, floor to ceiling, with bundles, boxes, and piles that included everything, from a wine press to a baby carriage. City crews eventually removed more than 130 tons of junk from the house, including decades-old newspapers, broken down furniture, the chassis of a Model T, 14 pianos, 2 organs, and more than 25,000 books. The house was in such disrepair that it had to be torn down. And for decades afterwards, New York City firefighters used the term a Collier mansion to refer to a house that was so filled with trash and debris that it became a danger to the occupants, their neighbors, and emergency responders. A small park now marks the spot where that house once stood, a monument to what Proverbs might have called the destructive foolishness of hoarding. Jesus is remembered as saying, "Stop collecting treasures for your own benefit on earth, where moth and rust eat, where thieves break in and steal. But instead, collect treasures for yourselves in heaven, where moth and rust don't eat them, and where thieves don't break in and steal them. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." The Apostle Paul wrote to his young friend Timothy these words, "Actually, godliness is a great source of profit when it is combined with being happy with what you already have. We didn't bring anything into the world, so we can't take anything out of it. We will be happy with food and with clothing. But people who are trying to get rich fall into temptation. They are trapped by the many stupid and harmful passions that plunge people into ruin and destruction. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some have wandered away from the faith and endured a lot of pain because they made money their goal. There was a woman named Dorothy, and she was the only person James Harnish ever knew who received the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor that Congress can give. She was one of the most fascinating women I'd ever known. She was born in 1914, and on a family trip to the Chicago World's Fair, she flew with her father in a seaplane. The thrill of that experience never left her. She earned her private pilot's license in 1939, 3 years after she graduated summa cum laude from Ohio University. Her father, a land developer in Tampa, Florida, gave her a Piper Cub, a single-engine plane that she used to deliver supplies around the state in the family business. After Pearl Harbor, Dorothy became one of 1,800 women who formed the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, WASP. Nearly half the women who began the training didn't make it through, but Dorothy did. She spent the war years ferrying planes from factories to military bases, testing newly repaired planes, and towing targets for male pilots to practice their dogfight skills. In 2010, Dorothy and her fellow WASPs were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal for their service. Expressing her genuine humility, she said, "I was surprised. It was more than I expected to receive." After the war, she graduated from nursing school at Case Western Reserve University and returned to Tampa and worked as a public health nurse until her retirement in 1975. It demonstrated both her love of nursing and her commitment to the welfare of the community. Early in life, Dorothy's father taught her the wisdom of saving and of investing. Though she never earned a large salary, she used her money wisely, invested carefully. She lived modestly in the home her father built in the 1930s, and across the years her wise investments grew. As a lifelong Methodist, she consistently supported the ministry of the church with her financial commitments. Dorothy had a passionate commitment to higher education, and when Lloyd Knox, her former pastor, was elected bishop, she was able to fund a scholarship in his honor at his alma mater. And when she died in 2011, her estate completed a $4.7 million donation to Case Western to establish an academic center for flight nursing. Her bequest to Hyde Park United Methodist Church was the largest donation ever made to the church's endowment fund, establishing scholarships for young persons growing up in the church. And another part of her estate went to provide ongoing support for the local food bank, the United Methodist Church's children's home, and a youth camp. Though she never married or had children of her own, generations of youth will be blessed by her visionary stewardship. With all of that, James Harnish says, I will remember about Dorothy the most are her infectious laughter, the way her smile spread across her face, and the relentless joy that flowed through her life. At the end of Proverbs, we find this beautiful description. Of a strong, of a capable woman. She gets up while it is still night, providing food for her household. She surveys a field and acquires it from her own resources. She plants a vineyard. She works energetically. Her arms are powerful. She realizes that her trading is successful. She doesn't put her lamp out at night. She puts her hands to the spindle. Jesus said this. This is what God's kingdom is like. It is as though someone scattered seed on the ground, then sleeps and wakes night and day. The seed sprouts and it grows. And the farmer doesn't know how it happens, but it does. The earth produces crops all by itself. First the stalk, then the head, and then the full grain comes. Jesus told another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who was leaving on a trip. He called his servants and handed his possessions over to them. To one he gave 5 valuable coins, to another he gave 2, and to another he gave 1. He gave to each servant according to that servant's ability. Then he left on his journey. After the man left, the servant who had 5 valuable coins took them and went to work doing business with them. He gained 5 more. In the same way, the one who had 2 valuable coins gained 2 more. But the servant who had received 1 valuable coin dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants returned to settle accounts with them. The one who had received 5 valuable coins came forward with 5 more. Master, you gave me 5 coins, and look, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, Excellent. You are a good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will put you in charge of much. Come, celebrate with me. The second servant also came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 valuable coins. Look, I've gained 2 more. Well done. You too are a good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I'll put you in charge of much. Come, celebrate with me. Now the one who had received 1 valuable coin came and said, Master, I knew you were a hard man. You harvest grain where you haven't sown. You gather crops where you haven't spread seed. So I was afraid. And I hid my valuable coin in the ground. Here, have what's yours. His master replied, You evil and lazy servant, you knew that I harvested grain where I haven't sown, and that I gather crops where I haven't spread seed? In that case, you should have turned my money over to the bankers, so that when I returned, you could give me what belongs to me with interest. Therefore, take from him the valuable coin and give it to the one who has 10 coins. Those who have much will receive more, and they will have more than they need. But as for those who don't have much, even the little bit they have will be taken away from them. In one of John Wesley's writings, he draws the distinction between what it means to be a steward and what it means to be indebted toward God. Reminding us that we're not debtors to God, but stewards. We are now indebted to God for all that we have. But although a debtor is obliged to return what he has received, yet until the time of payment comes, he is at liberty to use it as he pleases. It is not so with a steward. A steward is not at liberty to use what is lodged in his hands as he pleases, but as the master pleases. For he is not the proprietor of any of these things, but barely entrusted with them by another. Now, this is exactly the case of everyone with relation to God. We are not at liberty to use what he has lodged into our hands as we please, but to use it as God pleases, who alone is the possessor of heaven and earth and the Lord of every creature. We have no right to dispose of anything we have, but according to God's will, seeing that we are not proprietors of any of these things. Someone from the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus said to him, "Man, who appointed me as judge or referee between you and your brother?" Then Jesus said to them, "Watch out. Guard yourself against all kinds of greed. After all, one's life isn't determined by one's possessions. Even when someone is very wealthy." Then he told them a parable. A certain rich man's land produced a bountiful crop. He said to himself, "What will I do? I have no place to store my harvest." Then he thought, "This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. That's where I'll store all my grain and my goods. I will say to myself, you have stored up plenty of good, enough for several years. Take it easy. Eat, drink, and enjoy yourself." But God said to him, "Fool, tonight you will die. Now who will get the things you have prepared for yourself? This is the way it will be for those who hoard things for themselves and who aren't rich toward God." I think there's absolutely nothing that is inconsistent with a lifestyle of saving money, even while we are generous and kind and compassionate to the people around us. When I was young and starting out our adult life, I had a very good friend who gave me some wisdom. Now, I kind of needed it because my mother wasn't all that good at managing her money, and whenever it came to finances in my home, everything always seemed to be something of a panic. And my parents were divorced. And my father, on the other side, was profoundly secretive. He never told me anything about his finances, probably for fear that I would tell my mother. So I had a lot to learn in my early years. And I remember someone I admired and respected said, take 10% of what you have and always give it to God. Take 10% of what you have and save it. And build your life on the 80% that's left. Now, when he first gave me that advice, I could not follow it. I had debt from education that I had to pay off, and I just couldn't get it together to do that. But over the years, we did our best to get into that kind of pattern. So I'd like to invite you to consider that for a pattern for your own lifetime. 10% for God, 10% for the future, and 80% for now. I think the most important part about saving is really setting a goal and then make a plan, and then follow the plan until something happens and you get knocked off the plan, and then do what you can to get back on that plan. There's nothing unchristian about doing what we can to care for ourselves in order that we can care for others across a lifetime. There's nothing wrong with a disciplined life of saving. I have one more story for you. Her name is Osella McCarthy. She's an amazing person. She was born in Wayne County, Mississippi in 1908. Her mother was a cook for a prominent white family. Osella was a student at Eureka Elementary School when her mother taught her to save. She began ironing other people's clothes and started putting a little bit of her small earnings into a savings account in the First Mississippi National Bank. She had to quit school in the 6th grade to take care of an elderly aunt and never went back. Osella never married or had children of her own. She never owned a car. She walked everywhere she went and rode with friends to the Friendship Baptist Church. Outside her church and the families whose laundry she washed and ironed for 74 years, no one had ever heard of her until word got out that she'd given $150,000 to establish a scholarship at the University of Southern Mississippi, a school that would not have admitted her in the days of segregation. She said, "I'm too old to get an education, but but they can. I can't do everything, but I can do something to help someone. And what I can do, I will do. When asked how she accumulated so much money, she said, "It really wasn't hard. I didn't buy things I didn't need. The Lord helped me, and the Lord will help you too." One of the ways that she did so well is the bank that she was a part of was filled with good loan officers. And when they noticed that her savings account was a little higher than it needed to be, they made helpful suggestions. She went from different investments, and over the course of her lifetime, she was blessed indeed. So this morning I'd like us to think of these thoughts. Let them roll around in the back of our heads. Let us consider not just now, not just this moment, but to consider our life and to consider our lifetime as disciples of Jesus Christ. Amen.